Dennis Nedry's death in Jurassic Park is one of the darkest but most legendary scenes in cinema history. But have you ever actually wondered what happened to his body? Why was it never mentioned again? Was it ever found? Lewis Dodson gave him $750,000 just to turn up at the East Dock, and when he doesn't, do you think he's just going to forget all about that? Well, I've got the real truth on what happened to Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park, and you're not going to want to miss a single bit of this, so get ready. Now, Dennis Nedry was one of the main antagonists of Jurassic Park, and due to his financial problems and low salary, he accepted a bribe from Biocen to smuggle dinosaur embryos off the island. Dennis decided to accept an offer to commit industrial espionage for Lewis Dodson to steal InGen's dinosaur embryos, which would grant Biocen a competitive edge. In exchange, Dodson would give Dennis $1.5 million and gives him an advance of $750,000 before he even does anything. Now, Dodson is a man you wouldn't want to mess with, and that's something we'll cover later on in the video. But for now, let's just continue our story. After this meeting, Dennis would return to Isla Nublar to go back to work, waiting until night to make his move to access the embryos. He created a backdoor system so he could deactivate nearly all of Jurassic Park's security systems except the raptor pen, so he's easily able to access cold storage and the embryos. With the security deactivated and with most of Jurassic Park's workers gone to escape the storm, Dennis accesses the cold storage room where he filled the modified Barbasol can with the dinosaur embryos. He then proceeds to escape the visitor center using Jeep 12. This is very important and something we will cover later on, and he travels to the East Dock. As we all know, he seems to lose himself in the wilderness, causing him to drive off-road and accidentally crash into a fallen tree in the nearby forest. We all basically know what comes next. He gets out of the car, tries to free his Jeep, and runs into a juvenile dilophosaurus. Now, many people ask how the Dilophosaurus is actually out at this point. Well, if you remember, he actually deactivates all the security fences that keep dinosaurs from escaping their paddocks, except the raptor pen. So it allowed the dinosaurs like the Dilophosaurus to roam freely. Now, as Dennis is returning to his car, we know he gets attacked upon by the Dilophosaurus, spitting venom into his eyes. Dennis then goes into his car, where unfortunately, the Dilophosaurus is stowed aboard into the passenger seat and presumably continues to bombard him with venomous spray and mauls him to death. And that's what we're led to believe. And this is the point where things get really interesting, because no one seems to mention Dennis Nedry, Dennis Nedry's family, or the fact that he was killed in the 1993 Jurassic Park incident. So what actually happened to him then? But first, I need to borrow 30 seconds of your time because I know how much you guys love dinosaurs. So I've struck up a partnership with GAMERSUPPS, who are the alpha of healthy energy supplements. I mean, look at the dinosaur art on the front of that. I love the taste of Grandpa's ashes in the morning. Gives me that real energy boost I need to be alpha of the pack, whilst being brave enough to carry one of my waifu cups to my next family gathering. If you want that level of alpha pack status, check out the link in the description and on screen now, as I've got you guys 10% off your next order. Thank you, GAMERSUPPS. Now back to the video, because let's not forget, we've got Lewis Dodson, who's now £750,000 down and just assumes Dennis Nedry has done a runner with the money. He's going to come looking. And what about Nedry's family? Surely they would be asking questions as well. Now, it's worth mentioning here there are two versions of Dennis Nedry's death, the novel version and the film version. I want to cover the novel version first so we can get that out of the way, and then continue with the film version. So in the novel, Dennis Nedry again does get attacked by a Dilophosaurus, but it's a different scene setting. The Dilophosaurus isn't like the one we see in the movie. In fact, it's several times larger. Now, the dinosaur blinds Nedry with its venomous saliva, rips his stomach open, causing his intestines to spill out, and then crushes his head in its jaws. A far more gruesome death than the original Jurassic Park. Now, Nedry's remains in the novel were found later on by Muldoon and Gennaro, and he was being devoured by a group of scavenging compies. Now, Gennaro does ask what they should do with his body, and Muldoon basically just states that they have more important things to worry about and left it where they found it. His remains were presumably destroyed when the entire island at the end of the novel was napalm bombed by the Costa Rican Air Forces. That solves the mystery of Nedry's body in the novel. Done and dusted. But the film, however, has far more backstory and mysteries than meets the eye. And believe it or not, there are actually references to Dennis Nedry's family in other iterations of Jurassic Park, but that's something I'll talk about later. Now, as for the film, the last time we see him is him being mauled to death in the Jeep, but that isn't the case throughout the franchise. Now, we do actually get to have a post-mortem in Jurassic Park the game, because Dennis Nedry never arrives at the East Dock with the modified Barbasol can. Because of this, Biocen decides to send two agents to find and retrieve the Barbasol can for Dodson. While searching for the modified Barbasol can, Nima finds Dennis Nedry's body still inside his Jeep and briefly investigates his death to see if it could help her find the embryos. Although we see Dennis Nedry's body in the game itself is considered soft canon. And again, it doesn't really answer what actually happens to his body after the incident, so let me continue to explain. So now we do know that Dodson was very upset about losing his 750,000 and did send agents to go and retrieve the can from Dennis Nedry himself. We later find out that Dodson does get the Barbasol can, but I'll cover that later on as well. Now there was a canon website called the DPG, which is the Dinosaur Protection Group. On this website it had various information, which was all canon to the Jurassic franchise, and one of these bits of information was the investigation into Dennis Nedry and his espionage. There's a report on file which goes through Dennis Nedry and his backstory, and also tells us that there was a cleanup operation in 1994. Now looking at this very sensitive document, you can clearly see that they investigated the premeditated attack on the park systems, and it was sabotaged by Dennis Nedry. Now you can pause here and have a great look at this information because there's some great lore in this document, but I want to draw your attention to the location of the deceased employee. And what it actually says is the remains of blanked out, which is obviously Dennis Nedry, were discovered during the 1994 cleanup located outside tunnel leading towards the east dock. Post-mortem concludes the cause of death as and is blacked out. Now what is extremely interesting is the fact that this is canon to the Jurassic franchise, so canonically we have now proven that Dennis Nedry's body has been recovered. But what actually happened to him after that? Surely his family will come looking for him, and we do have two relatives on file which we know about. 4 years after this incident, Peter Ludlow took the position of CEO at InGen with the proposal of making Jurassic Park in San Diego. It's in this film, The Lost World Jurassic Park, which is in 1997, Ian Malcolm criticizes Peter Ludlow for twisting the facts surrounding the deaths of 3 people.
You signed a non-disclosure agreement before you went to the island that expressly forbade you from discussing anything you saw. You violated that agreement.
Yeah, I did, and you lied. You twisted the facts surrounding the deaths of 3 people. There aren't any versions of the truth, and I'll tell you something, InGen can't keep spewing out.
InGen is my responsibility now, Doctor, and I will jealously defend its interests. In a few weeks' time, it'll be long forgotten.
Not by me.
Which he quotes Donald Gennaro, Ray Arnold and Robert Muldoon. Why it's not specifically stated, it is clear that Dennis was not one of the deaths Ian was talking about, probably because Ian was unaware of the death or InGen had actually covered it up. And why would they do that, I wonder? Well, let me continue. Now in the deleted scene in The Lost World Jurassic Park, Peter Ludlow mentions the families of Gennaro, Muldoon and Ray Arnold suing InGen for their deaths, but he does not mention the Nedry family, which is extremely odd. But one could argue and say possibly that Nedry had no family. If even that was the case, there would have been an investigation and compensation would have been given somewhere. And let's not forget, we do know Dennis Nedry has 2 relatives on file. We have Diane, who's his sister supposedly, and Danny Ned Meyer, which is his nephew. Both of these, however, are considered non-canon and they're from the Lego franchise, so I'll not be counting them in this entry. Now we know InGen tried to cover up the Jurassic Park incident because it's mentioned directly with Ludlow and with Ian Malcolm. But what is interesting? The fact of Dennis Nedry either A, never knew about his death, or B, decided to not sue. However, the likelihood of them not knowing that Dennis Nedry went missing on Jurassic Park is highly unlikely because the report of the 1994 cleanup eventually comes to light. So any surviving relatives at this stage would 100% be on InGen's case and suing for their money, but there is a huge problem and reason why they wouldn't. Let's think back for a second. Dennis Nedry was directly responsible for the events at Jurassic Park, not to mention he was conducting industrial espionage, which InGen could have sued him for anyway, and for the destruction of Jurassic Park. The likelihood is his family did contact InGen with intent to sue. InGen, on the other hand, countered this with a claim saying he was probably responsible for his own death. And not only that, he is the one who shut down the systems, resulting in the dinosaurs escaping, and conducted industrial espionage in itself, which was illegal. Now, I'm no lawyer, but in a court of law, I would find it very difficult for Nedry's family to sue InGen for something he'd created himself and was conducting espionage. But the question of the matter is, did they have proof that he was conducting illegal espionage? Well, looking at the report, they have enough information to conclude that he was indeed stealing the embryos. The fact that there was a virus backdoor created into the systems clearly shows premeditation for stealing of InGen's works. But would they be able to trace this back to Biosyn and get Biosyn involved? Because if you remember, Lewis Dodson had paid $750,000 to Dennis Nedry, which he had never got back. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be happy about this. But Lewis Dodson does find the Barbasol can, several decades later, and he finds it in Camp Cretaceous. Now don't get me wrong, there could have been so many better ways to do this, but Lewis Dodson travels to Isla Nublar to capture dinosaurs for Manticore's mind control chips. While chasing Blue the velociraptor through the jungle, Dodson inadvertently stumbles upon the can and the embryos, commenting that he could have used them 25 years ago, and subsequently takes the can and the embryos with him, possibly to a facility, and help him create Biosen's own dinosaurs at the Biosen Sanctuary. 29 years after the death of Dennis, Dodson attempts to flee with the can, but was slain by a trio of dilophosaurus, the same fate that had befallen Dennis. Thus, we come full circle. We've now completed our investigation. We know Dennis's body was recovered in the film because we have the post-mortem report from 1994's cleanup operation. We know that if Dennis Nedry did have any surviving family, the likelihood of them suing InGen would have been relatively small, and even if they did, it would have been unsuccessful. Can I solve all Jurassic Park related mysteries? You bet your ass I can. I'd like to thank all my YouTube members for helping support me and make these videos. Thank you very much, guys. I'm Shadows, and if you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for plenty more Jurassic Park content coming up. It's going to be a huge year for the channel. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.